Kia ora, Sue Gray here outside the High Court in Nelson with Joe Rifici. We've just come out of the court. Joe's just sworn his affidavit as a representative of the plaintiff in these proceedings. These are the proceedings challenging the legality of the vaccine, its approval under the Medicines Act, its approval as a prescription-only medicine, which the law says is only for the treatment of a limited number of patients. And we believe that the proposal of the government to roll it out to the entire adult population of New Zealand is well outside the intent of that legislation. The case is also questioning the failure to describe it as a prescription-only medicine, and representations made by the Prime Minister and other representatives, publicly appointed representatives, who claim this vaccine is safe and effective when the evidence is very much to the contrary. So Joe's just filed a very substantial affidavit with a lot of documents in it, attached to it. And in addition to that, we've got the documents here, in addition to that, we've already had an affidavit prepared by a doctor who has expressed her medical concerns about the way this vaccine rollout has been carried out and some of the representations that have been made and the deficiencies in the information, because the medicine, as a doctor, you're required to ensure informed consent of your patients. But what we have here is, I think they're called provisional vaccinators or temporary vaccinators who have no medical qualifications, rolling out an experimental mRNA vaccine that has only provisional consent for a limited number of people. The doctors themselves are very, very concerned that this is undermining their doctor-patient relationship and is putting patients at risk. So in addition to the medical affidavit, we have a letter. It's called an open letter from doctors. So over 30 doctors so far have signed this open letter, and this is attached to Joe's affidavit as evidence because the doctors have signed that because they, like the doctor who's sworn the affidavit, are very concerned about the way this has all been happening. So some of these documents will be able to be made public shortly. Other documents may be kept within the court process, but it's really important. The public is really interested in this case. There's been so much misinformation. It's really important that people do their own research. Do not rely on what you are being told, because people that look behind the gloss, behind the spin, come to realise that there is a lot more to this, a lot more safety questions, a lot more freedom and democracy questions than we're being told. So it's been a big day today getting this ready to file. I'll be now sending it off electronically to Wellington and physically dropping it into court tomorrow when I'm over in Wellington. Joe might have a few words as well.
Yeah, well, I'm filing on behalf of a society. I'm on the member of the committee of KTI, and I'm filing on their behalf. And it's because we have all these questions. There seem to be an enormous amount of questions that need to be answered before this rollout. And we're concerned that indicators of the number of problems with these vaccines so far indicate that this is more of a public health emergency than what the vaccines are meant to deal with.
Yeah, so it's a case where the medical principle of first do no harm seems to have been turned inside out. Many of the doctors who have signed these documents are concerned that the vaccine, which is supposed to be curing the problem, is causing more harm than COVID. And certainly in New Zealand, where, according to our government, COVID is eliminated, there is no immediate risk for most New Zealanders, and it's very concerning that people are being encouraged, and even in some cases under duress, to accept a vaccine without informed consent.
Yeah. The psychological pressures on people are enormous due to the way this is being promoted and the one-sided story that people have been hearing.
It's interesting to see that the unions are now starting to speak out, expressing concern that their members are being put under pressure to accept this experimental vaccine. And up until now, they've tended to toe the government line, but now faced with an injection of this experimental medicine, people are asking questions and a lot more people are getting informed and concerned. The fundamental issue is that it is illegal to require somebody to have a vaccination. Our bodies are sacred, they're ours. Nobody can tell us what injection to have. It's written into our New Zealand Bill of Rights that we cannot be forced to have medical treatment without our consent. It's written into the Health and Disabilities Code that no medical person, and presumably also none of these vaccinators, even if they're only temporary untrained vaccinators, none of these people can give you medical treatment without your informed consent. Informed consent means that you must know the risks, the benefits, the uncertainties and the alternatives. Now, the information sheet that the government is giving out to the vaccinators with the informed consent is grossly defective. There's very little information about the risks, there's very little information about the uncertainties, and there's no information about the alternatives. So we're really heading for a very important issue here, and it's great that the unions are starting to step behind their members. I know that there are a lot of doctors, nurses, policemen, people all around the country who are not wanting to be forced into a vaccine. There is no law that you must have a vaccine. At the moment, we have a prime ministerial decree that people are to be vaccinated. It was announced last Friday. The Prime Minister said that as of Monday, so as of Monday this week, they would be required to have a vaccine. She's put it back till the end of the month, but there is no law. And any attempt, in my view, to make a law, to make it compulsory for people to accept medication into their body that they do not consent to, is not a lawful law. It is contrary to the New Zealand Bill of Rights. The government has said up until now that vaccines will not be mandatory. And the craziest thing of all, the government itself accepts that this vaccine does not prevent infection or transmission. So it's actually a red herring. It's a red herring to require people to have this vaccine with all these promises of the difference it will make when the science does not support the spin that they're being told.
The no jab, no job policy, I'm not sure what it would specifically mean for workers to be moved sideways and whether that would influence their pay rate. However, I think it's still inappropriate to move anybody out of their current job on the basis of this. Forcing or coercing, and I think they're equivalent. When you talk about changing someone's livelihood or affecting their livelihood, that's effectively coercion. And you cannot force or coerce anyone to have a medical intervention of any kind. It's not only New Zealand law, but it's international conventions. It's the Nuremberg Code. It is totally inappropriate. There are people that actually subscribe to whole different paradigms of health, and to force them into a particular paradigm of health is completely inappropriate and I believe unlawful.
And it's particularly concerning here where the vaccine that people are being forced to get is not a safe vaccine and it's not approved by MedSafe. It has only provisional consent for a limited number of persons. It has not gone through the safety testing. The clinical safety trials aren't due for completion until 2023. They've only just started. So nobody knows what the risks will be. What we do know is that the AstraZeneca vaccine has caused all sorts of concerns about blood clots. Today it was announced the Johnson & Johnson vaccine has caused concerns about blood clots. We don't know what the concerns will be with this vaccine, but if it triggers mRNA to generate the spike protein within our body in an uncontrolled way, it's unlikely to be doing us much good.
And it's quite inconceivable, it's quite incredible to some of us that years ago people were fighting to not have genetically engineered crops in the soil in New Zealand, and now they're being asked to put genetic engineering mechanisms into their own body.